see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Good morning and welcome to Artefact Live with me, Scott MacArthur, where we look at the art and science of storytelling. Well, it's been an eventful few weeks. The show has been disrupted significantly by various things, including COVID. Two of my children have now had COVID. My youngest is currently, not my youngest, my second youngest is currently in bed with COVID. My partner has put her back out and my youngest son has got an allergy attack. So I'm the only one that's standing in this house. So it almost never happened today as well. So thank you very much for your patience. I do appreciate it. Other things that have been going on, you probably see that I don't have my normal background today. Well, that's because I've been filming for a client for the last week. If you'd said to me 18 months ago that I'd be making a dozen films for a client that was paying me to make these films, to talk about the things I'm interested in and to talk about the future of work, biotech, to talk about things like nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, exponential disruption, etc., I would have said you were a fool, because there's no way I could have done this 18 months ago. So thank you, COVID, because that time I've taken to learn these new skills is starting to bear some fruit for me, which I'm delighted about. The other thing that's happened is that I got a bit frustrated that I felt I wasn't fully discussing things with my audience in terms of what's been happening in the media. So what I've started to do is little lightning talks, almost call them fire chats, fire talks, where if something gets on my nerves or something piques my interest, I just go live on LinkedIn and on Facebook. And very oddly, I've now ended up twice on Radio 5 Live in the last 8 days because of that. So it is having an impact. Now, I'm not trying to game the system. You know, this is not a sales channel, and I'm not trying to get, I'm not looking for vanity stats or anything, but it's been interesting that just reacting live to things that are in the media, particularly on LinkedIn, seems to work. So expect more of that. I've got a couple of things this week that are starting to get on my nerves a wee bit, so I might come back onto Fire Talk and have a chat about that. Probably not today, though. I think once a day is probably enough for anybody that's on my LinkedIn profile and on the other channels. So anyway, thanks for your support. So what we're doing this week? Well, in a sense, it's a continuation of a discussion I had a couple of weeks ago with Olivia James. Now, Olivia, if you remember, was the Harley Street therapist who I've known for a couple of years. And she specializes mainly, she does other things, but mainly in trauma. And it was interesting. Now, I don't want this show to become a show about trauma, but nevertheless, it's an essential part of human experience. So when I was looking at various people who'd said they were interested in coming on the show, and this week's guest, Chris, had a particular story that I thought, I think this is something we need to share. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest this week, and my guest is called Chris, and it's Chris Freer. I'll get you on the screen now, Chris. Here we go. Welcome to Artefact, Chris. How you doing?
Absolutely super excited about this. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Don't be daft. It's been funny, hasn't it? Because we've had a few trials in the background, haven't we, with the technology?
Yeah. But I can normally put it down to that. I'm an old man now. And technology has passed me by a little bit.
I think, Chris, I need to give you some. No, I don't think it's been you're being an old man or anything like that. It's kind of a symptom of where we're at with the tech, because the platform I use, which you can see in front of you now, is called Restream. And Restream is one of there's really 2 or 3 main platforms. StreamYard and Restream are the main 2 that people use. And both of those platforms Chris, they're run by children. They're like 18, you know, at least they look 18, and they're in what they call perpetual beta. So these things are never right. There's always issues. And I spent 2 hours on the chat with them this morning because there was an issue with compatibility between Restream and Facebook. So it's very common there's issues. So please don't beat yourself up about it. But it's so. I'm really chuffed you've come on, because you told me your story, at least part of your story, a few weeks ago when we first met. But I'm really looking forward to hearing the whole story. But could we maybe start by just, could you give the audience a feel for you? You know, who are you? What are you about? Who's Chris?
Okay. I'd like to start by saying that whatever I say today, I would never ever suggest that you don't take the advice of your health professional that is looking after you. But what I am going to suggest is that that's not the only road that you can go down. And I'm a real advocate of lifestyle choices to create the absolute best health environment in our body that we possibly can.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. So what is it you're in terms of, where are you, Chris? Where do you live?
I live in Malden in Essex, which is a very ancient town.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've lived here now since 2010.
Right. Okay.
I relocated here then.
So, and what's your career been like thus far, Chris? What's the game you're in? How do you make a living?
Now, I run a company called ARTEFACTLive, and we provide proactive support for people with learning and physical disabilities to be as independent as they possibly can in their life. And it could be something as simple as making a cup of tea safely, to actually getting themselves into paid employment.
Right.
You know, it's that varied. And myself, I've retrained, and I work as a therapist. I'm a hypnotherapist, but I like to call myself a mindset coach, if you like, a transformation therapist, really, because I tend to deal with people's locked up trauma, their self-limiting beliefs that they have, and we work on reframing and finding a new way forward towards whatever they feel they want to achieve. Yeah.
Okay. There's quite a lot to unpack there, Chris. Could we maybe go back a step though? Your career before you were in therapy was quite. Could you tell that story, because it's quite an interesting one? I think people would be interested in it.
I mean, I have had a varied career, actually.
That's an understatement, Chris.
Yeah. I left school with absolutely no qualifications at all. In fact, I kind of left school almost at 13 years of age. I used to bunk off school and go and work on Romford Market. And I managed to get myself an apprenticeship as an electrical engineer. I qualified as an electrical engineer. And then I got involved in the gaming industry when one-armed bandits were going from mechanical pullers over to an electromechanical. So I got involved in that. And eventually that led to me getting involved in the license trade somehow. I don't know how that happened. And at my height, I had 4 pubs and a couple of clubs on the go.
Right. And were they in London, or where were they?
Yeah, on the outskirts of London. Yeah. They were located in Rainham, Barking, Dagenham.
Gosh.
All around there. That sort of area. Yeah.
Okay. And did you retire from that business, or did you decide to move on, or what was the transition?
Well, that's where everything. I'm struggling to say went wrong, because it didn't go wrong. It did go wrong, but it didn't go wrong.
Yes.
that's where my life-defining change came, if you like. Yeah. Would you like me to tell you a little bit more about that?
I think that would be lovely. Thank you.
Okay. So back almost 20 years ago now, I got diagnosed after probably 4 or 5 years of going to see my GP to be told that these weird and wonderful symptoms that were affecting me were all due to stress. They were all stress-related conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to be honest, I didn't really feel that stressed at the time. I kind of thought I was Mr. Invincible, really, and people used to say to me, you can't carry on going the way you are, doing them 16-hour days and stuff like that. Something's going to break. But I felt right, apart from the fact that I had all these weird things happening to me. I was losing feeling in my hands. I was losing control over my bladder.
Right.
And I was getting really forgetful and just weird, and I had weird pains and weird electric shocks in my body and all bits and pieces like that.
Yes. Until
we got to, and it was the year 2002 when the World Cup was in Asia, I believe, and I know this sounds horrendous, but I was doing breakfast and a pint at sort of like 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning, because that's when the matches were.
Oh, I remember that. I like was that Japan? Was it Korea and Japan, wasn't it? It was the Japanese.
That's it. Yeah. And I was running around like the proverbial blue-arsed fly, and I come back to my main club actually, and the manageress in there, and I said, you know what, I really don't feel very well. And the next thing I knew, there was an ambulance crew there, and they were taking me out of my club. And they carted me off to hospital. So,
right.
I had several checks and stuff like that, heart and stuff, and they kind of sort of said, well, you're not too bad, but you haven't eaten for quite a while, have you? And I said no, but they suggested that I go and see my GP,
right,
and because there needed to be further tests, and I'd actually relocated. I'd moved out of the outskirts of London, and I'd moved to a place called Southwood and Ferrers then, and I'd never met the GP where we'd had to reassign to, and I went to see this GP, and she was, I will always remember this lady. She was a wonderful, wonderful, real old school doctor, old school doctor, and she spent a lot of time with me, and I think I was probably with her for an hour. She ran tests on me and said that she definitely felt that there was something neuropathic. I think there were neurological that there was wrong with me. Yeah. And she asked if I was able to afford to go and see a private neurologist, because I didn't have private health, and it wasn't something that I kind of believed in. And I could. I was able to finance that.
Okay.
So she put me in touch with this neurologist who ordered several tests for me, and sat me down and done tests like over I'm talking about MRI scans, but he did actual tests on my body.
Right.
And he then said to me, he said, look, this condition, you've definitely got something neurological wrong with you, and it could be one of six things, six conditions, and I can only remember one of them, right, that he said, and one of them was actually syphilis, believe it or not.
Right. Okay.
And, I kind of was thinking, I really hope I've got syphilis, because because he actually said to me, he said, if it's that, we can do something about it. He said, but the others,
Right.
there's not a lot we can do. Yeah.
Ah, right. Okay.
So I kind of read, and I was trying to work out how I'd got it, and because I'd convinced myself that that's what it was, you know.
Yes.
Well, after the MRI scan and the lumbar puncture,
Oh dear.
which you hear these horrific stories about, and you do, but I found the procedure to be quite okay. It was all right. It was
Oh,
okay.
that's nice.
I bent over and just watched the birds flying by as the procedure was going on. Yeah. And I found out from them tests that I have a condition called multiple sclerosis.
Oh, right. Okay.
The neurologist said to me, he said, look, it is incurable, but don't worry about it too much. He said, because we've got some, powerful disease modifying drugs that we can give you. It will slow down the progression of this condition. And, go off and, sort of live your life as normally as you can. He said, don't do too much exercise because I don't think that's good for people with the condition that you have. But just go off and live your life and don't visit Dr. Google, which is, of course, the first thing I did. And I've just started to find all these horror stories, really.
Yes.
And they were horrific. And I got introduced to an MS group where I went there, and you saw these people that were a long way down their journey, and they was in electric wheelchairs, and they were sort of like immobile, and it absolutely scared the bejesus out of me, to be quite honest with you.
Right.
So
how did you deal with it then? What was the?
Well, I didn't deal with it, Scott. Really.
Did you not? Right.
No,
okay.
I did deal with it in the way that I did, because I was quite public facing. I was this cheeky publican, cheeky chappy kind of geezer,
Yes.
and nothing beats me sort of fella,
Yeah.
But actually, behind that suit of armour that I built around me, I was falling apart inside,
Really?
and I really was falling apart inside.
Yes.
I became very anxious. I was worrying about the future. I had a young family. I got 4 amazing children. I did have quite a nice lifestyle as well, as you can imagine. But I knew that I couldn't. I knew that I couldn't maintain that.
Right.
So, yeah. Anyway, I started the disease modifying drugs. I was taught how to inject myself 3 times a week,
right,
in various parts of my body, and off I went. But I just seemed to be getting worse. Nothing seemed to be working. I was. There's different stages of multiple sclerosis, and I was told that I was in the relapsing remitting stage,
right,
which means that you have a relapse and you feel really ill, and then you feel reasonably okay,
okay,
again. And I was waiting for that time when I felt reasonably okay, and it wasn't happening. My first wife, who I have absolutely no animosity towards at all, because this does happen to many people that are diagnosed with these kind of conditions, but she chose that she didn't want to be married to someone who's ill. It's not what she'd signed up for.
Yeah.
And she started divorce proceedings against me, which I did take really bad, and I slipped into depression. And in 2007, it was 2007. I think it was May actually. I woke up in a room above one of my pubs that I'd rented out, and I'd taken over one of the rooms because I was no longer in the family home.
Right.
And I woke up and it was actually a really beautiful morning. And I looked out the window and I just thought, today is a good day to end my life. And I went out and had a really serious attempt at doing that.
Right.
It was obviously an incompleted attempt, but nevertheless, it hurt a great deal, and I got carted off to hospital. At that time, before that, I hadn't. I thought I was worth nothing. I absolutely
Really?
felt I had no worth at all, and the thing that saved me that day was compassion.
Really?
But it wasn't compassion for me. It was compassion for the lorry driver whose lorry I intended to throw myself under the front of it.
Right.
Unfortunately, I caught his eye, and all of a sudden, I just thought, what is this act that I'm about to do going to do to him?
Right.
And it made me hesitate, and I glanced off the side of the lorry, fortunately, and got carted off to hospital. So I got sectioned for a little while, but I knew it was then that this huge wake up call came for me, because I'd always been this sort of positive sort of guy, you know, and I had this, I had this huge wave of guilt came over me, because all of a sudden I thought to myself, you know, I was thinking about the lorry driver. What was this going to do to my children?
Yes.
You know, I hadn't even spared a thought for them, and I was shocked, you know, and it was horrendous for me, and I thought I've got to do something about this, you know. And I, unbeknownst to me in a way, that day, whilst it was a really, really bad day, it was one of the best days of my life as well, because it was the day I hit rock bottom.
Yes.
It was the day that I realised that I could rebuild a life built on solid foundations. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Right. So that, like, I mean, quite often I've heard that referred to as a threshold moment, or a, you know, or a period where you feel like you change is there, and you used the word earlier, transformation, which I thought was interesting. So thank you for sharing that story. That was I don't know how you feel about. How do you feel about telling that story publicly? Is this something you're used to doing?
I do it a reasonable amount of time.
Right.
You know, I've just come back from Edinburgh,
yeah,
the conference where I shared that story. It still has an effect on me, though, Scott.
right.
You know, it still makes me shudder a little bit, because every single day that I wake up now,
Yes,
is a good day, Scott.
absolutely. Yes.
You know, it don't matter what the weather's like, what's going on. It's a good day because I'm breathing, mate.
Yes. Well, let me tell you how that made me feel, because this show's about storytelling, and you told that very well. And what was my inner reaction to that? Well, I felt, oh my goodness, there was a sort of, I don't know if I'm just riffing here. I'm not trying to be smart or anything. It was like, was it pity? Was it compassion? Was it, oh my God, if that's permitted? But I want to know, and I suspect everyone watching wants to know, okay, what happened next? Because you've now had that threshold moment,
Yes.
Chris. So what happened next? You know, how did that, after you've been sectioned, what happened?
Okay, so luckily, someone, well, actually, it was, although I hadn't got divorced yet, but it was actually my mother-in-law who came to the hospital, and they released me to her, because they wouldn't let me go because I didn't have anyone to live with to look after me. So they released me to her, and I started my journey. I did take the antidepressants for a couple of weeks, and again, I've got nothing against pharmaceuticals. I've got nothing against anything like that at all, But yeah. I do think that they get used a bit too much. But anyway, so what happened next was that obviously I stopped the care in the community, if you like, and I started to regain control. I moved back to Hornchurch, where I used to live. And I got closer to my brother because he lives down in that part of the world, and I just started to repair my life. But my neurologist, and he was an NHS neurologist by this time because I couldn't afford private.
Yes,
my neurologist had seen me getting steadily worse. And I was really struggling quite badly. He ordered an enhanced MRI scan it was 2008. When he got the results back from that, he told me that multiple sclerosis had now entered the secondary progressive stage, and that there were no disease-modifying drugs available to me. He was unable to slow the progression of this condition now.
Right.
He could only give me baclofen, gabapentin, pregabalin, amitriptyline type drugs to deal with the neuropathic pain and the muscle spasm and all that kind of things that are associated with MS. And he also advised me to prepare myself for a wheelchair.
Right.
Because in his opinion, the way that this condition was progressing in me, that's where I would be. I would be in a wheelchair. Yeah.
Right, okay.
And he was right.
Right.
He was right. And I believe you have a picture of me in that chair.
I do, actually. Let me just show you that. Here we are. So what's that picture? That's obviously you, but what's going on there?
That's me. Yeah, that's me. Well, 2010, this amazing lady came into my life. Yeah, wow. Who I'm proud to say is now my wife. And we lived in, we live in Malden. And what had happened when she was on her own, some wide boy gardener kind of guys, landscaper, she had some circles out the front of the house in the garden. And what he'd done was he'd come along and he'd done a load of work, but he'd just laid the turfs over the top of the concrete base of the circles.
Oh, for goodness sake.
And of course, what happened was that the grass died on the circle, and we couldn't work out why that was going on. Of course, when I went and had a bit of an investigation of it, I realised why that was. And I dug that concrete out on my hands and knees, and I dragged the rubble from my chair with a rope over to the skip, and I got rid of the rubble, and I'd done it all on my own. And I published it on Facebook because it was a local landscaper around here, and I kind of documented what I did.
Yes.
To see if I could get a response from it, and I didn't. But anyway, so, but I think that kind of describes my mentality a little bit. I'm a bit awkward, and I am a bit awkward. I'm a bit stubborn, but actually that was good for me. And around about that time that I was doing that, I was sitting over. We live in a beautiful part of the world, and there's a beautiful estuary near us. And I was over the park in my chair, and I was looking out over the estuary, and I actually believe it was my old mum who whispered in my ear, and she's been long gone, but she whispered in my ear, and I'm sure she said, if you don't start using your legs, boy, you're going to lose them forever. You know. And it kind of prompted this change for me, and I started to study exercise.
Right.
I started to really study nutrition. I started to listen to my body, you know, and listen to whatever I was consuming and what kind of effect it was having on me. I learned about meditation. I learned about mindfulness. And I studied people walking.
Right.
And I started by crawling, really, you know, and I used to crawl to move my limbs and found that I did start to get control back.
Right.
I felt better changing my diet as well. And I have to say, although it's been a very interesting journey, and it's been up and down, up and down, up and down. But I tend to eat a mainly plant-based diet now, and I consume the best possible products that I can. I don't tend to eat anything that's produced for me. It's all created, you know, either by myself or by my wife. But I know what's in them ingredients.
Yes.
And yeah, I feel. I'm 62 now. I feel fitter and healthier now with an incurable autoimmune illness than I did when I was 42.
Right. And was that the beginning of this mindset notion that you talk about? Was that where you started to think, okay, there's something in this that perhaps I can share with other people? Was that when it started?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm absolutely. I mean, we are literally only what we think, aren't we?
Yes.
You know, and I know that sounds a bit of a glib statement, but it is so true.
Yes.
You know, one of the statements I love is Henry Ford, and he said, "If you think you can or you think you can't do something, you're probably right." You know, and I just think that's so wonderfully simple or simplistic, if you like.
Yes.
But it is so true, and
So, I mean, the next natural question is, you don't use a wheelchair anymore, do you? You're or you still use it, but occasionally. Is that how it works, or what's happening?
I mean, I still have it. It's parked up. I choose only to use it when it's of benefit to my family, if you
Right.
like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it was my eldest daughter that introduced me to a wheelchair in the beginning.
Right.
Because there was something that I did leave out of my journey, if you like, because when I got divorced, one by one, my children came to live with me.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it happened over a period of time, but one by one, my children came to live with me, and that was amazing. It was wonderful, and I have such a relationship with my children. They are comfortable with me sharing my story.
Yeah.
They are 100% supportive of me in what I'm doing, and they know why I'm doing what I do and why I'm sharing, warts and all, my story.
Well, when we come back from a short break, I'll ask you to share your artifact with the group, if that's okay, Chris, because we would love to see what your artifact is. And I guess the thing that I would like to hear more about is how you've, I mean, that's a lovely story, and I'm delighted that you've shared it with us. And I mean lovely and well told, not lovely and in your experience. But I'd like to know, what you're now doing with that story. How you're using that story to transform the lives of other people. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So my name is Scott MacArthur, and you're listening to Artefact Live. And the reason I started this show, this is the 48th show, which I find quite remarkable just thinking about it. The reason I started this show was because, well, I always thought that story was something quite special. And did I understand it? Maybe not. I don't know. But I always knew that there was something special about story. And my guest today, Chris Freer, I think he's already proven that, because that's been a very emotive story. It was told with a smile on his face, but you could also see the change in his reactions and his facial expressions change, because he was remembering some of these things that he was experiencing, and it was pretty harrowing, I think you'll agree. But in the second half of the show, I mean, I really want us to delve into that, because the other thing that's important for me, certainly, is that I believe that a good story well told can be generative. Something can come from it that can actually be a very, very positive thing. So growth can come through, and in this case, from trauma, you can get post-traumatic growth. So let's go back to Chris and ask him some more questions. But if you have any yourself, please put them in the chat, and we'll see if we can get to them before the end of the show. So thanks very much for tuning in to Artefact Live with me, Scott MacArthur, and I'll bring my guest back on, Chris Freer. So Chris, I asked you if you could kindly bring an artifact with you. Could you share the artifact that you've brought with us and tell the story behind it, please?
This was a tough one, but
Right,
if you can see this, this is ducky.
Ducky. Right. Okay.
Ducky.
Excellent.
And it's the first walking aid that I ever bought, which I bought many years ago now. Do you know why I bought it?
Why is that?
Because I was self-conscious, and I used to think people thought that I was half cut when I was walking around.
Oh, really? Right.
And actually, I remember back in the day that there was these T-shirts, and I'm sure they're still there. There's these T-shirts that you could buy, saying, some of them were a little bit, some of the wording might have been something that we shouldn't really broadcast on a family show like this, but basically, and you can put your own interpretation into this, that it would say on the T-shirt, "I'm not drunk, I have MS."
Ah, yeah? Right. Okay.
And I was back then. I was in a really bad place, and I was just really self-conscious. So Ducky, which has been, and as my children often say, has been a valued member of the family for many years now. Sort of reminds me of the avenues that you can go down in your own mind, those self-limit, and that's a self-limiting belief that I believe that people would be laughing at me or thinking that I was half cut, or do you get what I mean?
Yeah? I do. Yes. And that very naturally leads me to the nub of this. Really, you talked about being a mindset coach. What's a mindset coach? What are you trying to do? So with all this knowledge you've gained and this experience, what are you doing for your clients with that story, that experience? What are you sharing with them, and what is a mindset coach?
Okay, so the work that I do privately, if you like, with people is that I will get to that root cause of where something started. Mm-hmm. And everything starts somewhere.
Yes.
And I also believe, and many of the amazing health professionals that I connect with now believe that unresolved trauma, it could be in childhood. It could be even something that you no longer think about, but it's still in your subconscious, and it still controls the decisions that you make in everyday life. So what I do is using different techniques. Sometimes I am a qualified hypnotherapist, but I don't tend to use the hypnotherapy label. I tend to use a deep relaxation label. But we will explore that, and we will find the best way to remember that experience. Do you get what I mean? So
Yes.
there's a reframing, but you're never ever going to change the past. You cannot. It cannot be done, right? But the way that you remember it, or the way that you allow it to control the decisions you make in everyday life, can be changed.
Right, very good. And what type of people come to you? Is it all types, or is it
All types? Yeah,
all types. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, all types. I mean, obviously, I do have a bit of a slant towards health issues, if you like.
Yes. Yes.
Because I have a hell of a lot of empathy, and I actually think that, for someone like me, I have an acquired disability, haven't I? Yeah.
Yes.
So I knew what life was like before.
Right. Okay.
And I think a lot of people who acquire a disability mourn the life that they had. Yeah. Now, I did mourn the life that I had. Yeah. But I've actually realised that every day can be an amazing event, no matter where you are in life. And that's how I set out every single day.
That's lovely. So, I mean, the other thing you've done wonderfully is that one of the aspects of storytelling, Chris, that I really like is that it can act as an empathy engine. So you've just proven it, because you've told a personal story, quite a harrowing story, but you've come through that, and now you're using that experience to help people. But I certainly, when you said you feel a lot of empathy, I feel empathy towards you now. I mean, I can't quite. There's debates about what empathy means, but I haven't been in that situation, so I can't fully get it. But I definitely feel like I know you a bit better now that I've heard that story. Does that make sense? So I feel that I would be interested in talking to you about something that that I was struggling with. So that I think kind of, and I mean that, I'm not making that up because we're on on a show together. But let me ask you, I mean, what nowadays? What makes you passionate now? What are you passionate about now in your life as we come to the end today? What are you passionate about?
I am passionate about creating change for people.
Okay.
I'm very proud to be doing work with health professionals that are recognizing the benefit of lifestyle choices for people's overall health. And I am that conduit, really. I'm not a superhuman. I kind of think medical professionals are amazing, what they've achieved, all them qualifications. Yes. But I am that conduit, and I'm also living proof that this stuff works.
Yes.
And I will also say that all of your lifestyle choices, no matter what you do, it's not likely to do you any harm, is it?
No.
By eating healthily, eating the best, and I really want to say this, I'm sorry, but because I hear this quite a bit, and believe me, Scott, I pick up a lot of haters in different forums. Oh God, yeah. I've been called lots of things, and that's okay. That's okay, because I just love them a little tiny bit more, because I understand that they're stuck in that place where I probably was, you know.
Yes.
And I do understand it. I understand it. So, but one of the things that gets said to me is that they say, yeah, that's all right for you eating organic and all this and all that. It's so expensive. Well, I'll tell you what, it is not expensive, because what you do is you learn how to cook, yeah, and you learn how to use all the produce that you buy, you know, and you don't throw things away.
Yes.
You know?
Can I ask a final question linked to that, please, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely.
What does your doctor think about what's happened?
Really?
Yeah.
Do you really want to know?
I wouldn't have asked it if I didn't want to know. What does your doctor think?
Okay, well, I've got to tell you two things, really,
Right.
because my neurologist,
Yeah.
who told me I'd be in a wheelchair by 2012, and he was right, and used to see me every year. And I used to dutifully turn up in my wheelchair, because they always make the appointments for the people who have got mobility issues or broken limbs in the furthest possible clinic away from the car park, don't they? You know, always do that.
Yeah.
So I used to turn up in my chair, you know, and he'd go, well, there's no breakthroughs. I'll see you in a year. The last time I saw him, which, you know, it was, I think it was 2016, 2017, something like that. I walked into his surgery.
Yeah. Excellent.
And he looked at me and he went, what drugs have I put you on? What drugs is it? Right? And I said, I'm not on any drugs, doctor, am I? You told me that there was no drugs for me apart from the things which I've already said about. And he looked at me and he went, you look like you're getting better. What are you doing?
Excellent.
And I told him. And he dismissed it. And he hasn't seen me since.
Right. Brilliant.
Now, my GP, doctor's surgery, because obviously I get involved in quite a lot of health sort of forums and things around where I live. I gave a talk to my doctor's surgery.
Yes.
And one of the doctors, actually my doctor, he went, yes, but you've achieved all this breakthrough with the drugs that you're on. And I went, but I'm not on any drugs, doctor, am I? And he went, you must be. And I said, well, you've got my medical history. You can have a look, you know, look at it and tell me I'm lying, because I'm not, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
And
excellent.
Yeah. So, yeah. No.
Fab. Well, thanks for sharing that. Before I ask you about contact details and things, I've just got a question here from Joe, who's asked the question, how can you rise above the negativity of others, Chris? How do you manage that?
I think, that's a big question, that is, Scott. I mean, that's a wonderful question, Joanne.
Yeah.
I think, do you know what? I think for me, it's being kind to yourself, really. I think practicing self-love is extremely important. Being confident in the direction that you're going in is important as well. And I think also being true to self is massively important. And I just don't allow other people's negativity to seep into my life anymore, you know, and that's because the reason I'm able to do that is because I've dealt with all of my past trauma.
And that's kind of how you started the conversation, Chris. So thank you very much. That's been a lovely conversation. I have really enjoyed it, I must say. And can I ask if people are inspired or curious, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you? I mean, I've got your website here. I can put that on the screen. But
yes. Yeah, I mean, people can contact me through ARTEFACTLive.co.uk. There is a contact me bit on it. I have got a new website called chrisfreer.com.
All right. Okay.
I'm not sure that it's totally working correctly yet.
I'm
but
just checking.
The contact email is action@chrisfreer.com.
Okay.
Or you can link up with me on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn.
Fabulous.
Okay.
Well, Chris, it's been a pleasure to finally get to talk to you live on air on Artefact Live. Thank you very, very much for being my guest. I've enjoyed listening to your story, and I'm sure everyone when they listen to this will really appreciate it. Thanks again, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and peace and love to you all. See you later.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. It was another fascinating conversation, and as I said halfway through, it was lovely to see the reaction on Chris's face as he was telling that story. It was generative. It was, and I particularly liked the part, as I said during the show, that he's then taken that to help other people. So for me, that was a classic example of how story can work. And I'll finish as I always finish. I hope this is a story-filled week for you, because as Chris demonstrated beautifully there, these stories can change the world. They really, really can. Now, next week, as I've said before, I always try to create bridges between the various shows. And next week, we've got someone who is she calls herself a story therapist, or a book therapist. And what she does is, I mean, it's amazing. She helps people, in effect, be archaeologists of their own life. So I'm really interested in this because she gets them to read certain things. She gets them to read fiction, myth, whatever it is, a real life biography, etc. But she delves into their lives as well to use their stories to help them. And as you see, it links quite beautifully with the story that Chris just found. So join me next week for that. And finally, remember, as Chris demonstrated, that stories are so wonderful because they create a connection between people, and as such, they can act as an empathy engine. And in the year 2021, I think more empathy is something we could be doing more with. So thanks once again for tuning in to Artefact Live with me, Scott MacArthur, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.